welcome back to Storytime with Dave Booker. Appreciate you returning. Today we're going to continue on with Gods More Gods. And we're on chapter 3. We're moving along. And this time, this is something up Fred's sleeve. Early the next morning, Fred went into his office with high hopes. On his desk should be the answer he sought, the answer to all his problems. Sitting down, he opened the gilt envelope with trembling hands. If his boss approved his plan, then he might just be saved. If not, then his boss was determined to demote him, and all was lost before it began. Fred read it and wept. His idea had been approved. Fred dropped down heavily into his chair. His boss was impressed with the originality of Fred's plan. Since it had never been attempted, it was worth a try. Zeus had said to God that they had to get radical. Well, this plan was just that. If it worked, they might implement it in other problem areas. First, though, he'd see what the gods intended to do to improve their chances of success. He filled his coffee mug. Just for your information, the translators got it wrong. Coffee was the original ambrosia so much sought after. Going into the conference room, he saw a robed figure waiting. As he expected, God was there ahead of him, waiting to get his 2 cents in before everyone else arrived. God immediately went into pensive mode. Sir, upon reflection, it seems to me that we give our humans too much control. Free will, I mean. When they are placed living on the earth, we must monitor their every step. We set rules of conduct, and when these rules have been ignored, we are forced to take decisive actions to set an example. Granted, some of the people we place in charge go too far, and they're upholding the rules we make. But, in my opinion, that is better than letting the people make the rules themselves. However, with free will comes an almost certainty of failure, plus the lack of reverence due to ourselves. Fred appeared to find this logic interesting. Hold on one second, sorry. I really got to get a humidifier. Are you suggesting that we no longer give people free will? That we simply pre-program them with proper behavior and desire to only do what we tell them to, and to prefer almost continual reverence to their gods? God, having delivered his idea successfully, relaxed and smiled a superior smile. That is exactly what I suggest, thus ensuring success. Fred stood and walked around with his hands behind his back. The other gods filed in and sat quietly, since their boss was in deep reflection. Odin whispered something humorous to Sartorius, whose snicker woke Fred from his reverie. Ladies and gentlemen, once more it is time to reapply for positions. I also ask you to write out your solution for solving our mutual problem. How will you attempt to bring balance to the earth? Clipboards were passed from hand to hand, and everyone began writing. Well, everyone except God, who had already had his say. He filled in the application form and listed his desired location. He wanted Mount Olympus or similar high promontory. Zeus always lorded over God that while God had heaven as his refuge, it was not as grand as Mount Olympus. Heaven was just a big cloud in the middle of nothing. Mount Olympus was a secluded and regal spot, a place fit for gods to relax and party, yet still keep an eye on their charges. Somehow Zeus continually received mountaintop from which he could create a new Olympus. Clipboards were turned in as they were completed, and Fred scanned their answers. The actual applications were set aside. He wanted to see their ideas. Well, they all said the same as God. Eliminate free will. Fred stood and gathered them all with his eyes. Well, God, you seem to have sold your idea to everyone, or else someone else said it first, and you plagiarized it as your own. God was indignant. Sir, he replied haughtily, we spent all last night trying to work out our collective problem, and in the end this was considered the best solution. It was mine, as you might have known, and obviously others agree. I can't see that you need to cut him off. So you all agree with God that his idea is the best way to proceed. They all nodded. Fred nodded and looked them over calmly. Sonia's face flushed red and leaned off the table, roaring into their faces. And what the hell do we need you lot for? We take away free will, and then you have nothing to do for the entire time. Okay, so be it. We won't give the humans free will. Guess what? That means you're fired. The gods were indignant. Vishu, who was normally one of the most tractable of the gods, was suddenly the most vocal. He cried out in mortified tones, "We are assigned to Earth and to you. You have not the authority to fire us. We will report this overstepping of boundaries to the highest level, and I guarantee you it will be acted upon." Red hid a smile that was desperate to break through. He was enjoying this more than anything he'd experienced in many iterations. He had them right where he wanted them. With a mock regret in his voice, he addressed them again. "I think we're getting a bit overheated here. Look, I have to get some paperwork from the office. While I'm gone, we'll give you a chance to simmer down as well and perhaps come to some mutually beneficial idea." Leaving the office, he sat down at an empty chair within sight and sound, but not visible to them. He wanted to hear their discussion. Smiling, he patted the ace up his sleeve, located actually in the sleeve of his jacket. God moved to the head of the table and pounded his fist for order. "Now is the time we must stand together. We can force this proposal, and Fred is powerless to stop it. He can't fire us, and he's bound to realize it." Stu stood and walked menacingly over to where God stood. "Shut up, you arrogant ass. I'm tired of you always trying to push yourself up to the top of the heap." God drew himself up to his full height and flung his beard over his shoulder. "Go sit down, you great gump. You've never had an original idea in your life. You sit up above the clouds and watch. Only time you interfere is if she's pretty." Zeus promptly blackened God's eye with a sledgehammer blow. Totek came to God's aid and planted a haymaker against the side of Zeus's head. Vishu tried to intervene and was decked in his turn. In a matter of moments, the grand melee was in full flow. Chairs were thrown, tables overturned, and curses filled the air. Torn clothes were tossed as they were ripped in the frenzy of attacks. When they had fought themselves exhausted, Fred felt it was time to return. Grabbing a file from the desk, he almost skipped back into the conference room. He was beside himself in his glee. Picking up a chair and placing it at the head of the table, he bade them to sit on so the meeting could resume. Replacing chairs and tables took a while to get everything situated. Clothes reappeared and people dressed with as much dignity as they could muster. Red continued, "Hell, I've just been speaking to the head office, and they have confirmed your declaration that I cannot fire you." The guys smugly smiled back and at each other. Zeus stretched out his legs and placed a covering arm around Ishtar. She was curled up in her chair to hide herself. In the fight, the wisp of a dress she wore disintegrated, and she didn't feel it was appropriate to be seen naked by all the spirits who were passing by the window, and she was too embarrassed to provide her own. Red, seeing her discomfort, created a dress for her that was far more modest than her usual apparel. Red continued, "In fact, I have a communique from my boss here." He pulled out an ornate paper from his sleeve and laid it flat. The red seal and gold foil of the badge gleamed in the overhead light. "Like as I stated, I do not have the ability to fire you, so we'll take that option off the table." Again, the knowing nods from the gods. Red created an overhead projector and placed the paper on it so that all could see a highlighted portion. "It does say, though, that I can demote your asses for the next iteration." He glared them down and began to voice objections. "Shut up!" he roared, and immediately removed their powers. The guys saw hundreds of vials filled behind a wall cabinet. Meek now and powerless, the guys sat in bewildered silence. "Cosmic dust cloud is approaching from Alpha Centauri. It will take you to your new positions as janitors of Central Command." A quick burst of outrage was quickly swallowed as they remembered that they were presently gods in name only. They walked suddenly out the door to the stream. Their heads were hanging low, and they tried to hide themselves from the grinning faces of the spirits who pelted them with crumpled paper balls as they passed. Many had suffered at the hands of these former gods, and they wouldn't let the opportunity pass them by. The I don't know why I write words that I can't pronounce. The ignominy, well, I guess I can, of their fall cut deeper than any spirit could ever comprehend. As they filed into the cosmic dust cloud, no one seemed to realize that one of their number was missing. Dionysus was still in the club in his drug-induced stupor. Okay, so that's it for today. We'll go to the next chapter, which is New Gods, where we find out what his grand idea was. So that's it for today. I appreciate you stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. Hope you enjoyed all of the chapters we've read so far. I hope you'll also be back for the next reading in a couple of days. Look forward to seeing you. Hope you return. Be good to yourselves and take it easy.